Hey everyone, welcome to the Football Quizmaster. Today we are playing the game guessing the name of the football players by using emojis. You'll get 10 points for each correct answer, and the person who gives most answers correctly will win the game. So make sure to comment your scores down in the comment section. That being said, let's begin. The first question is, the player is Marco Verratti. Next up, the player is Gareth Bale. Next up, the player is Lionel Messi. Next one is the player is Adama Traore. Next up we have the player is Toni Kroos. Next question. The player is Matty Cash. Next question. The player is Harry Maguire. Next up. The player is Edinson Cavani. Next question. The player is Antoine Griezmann. Next up we have the player is Erling Haaland. Next question. The player is Cristiano Ronaldo. Next question. The player is Memphis Depay. Next question. The player is Achraf Hakimi. Next question. The player is Ousmane Dembele. Next up, the player is Joao Felix. Next one. The player is Leandro Paredes. Next question. The player is Mason Greenwood. Next question. The player is Manuel Neuer. Next question. The player is Hulk. Next one up is The player is Romelu Lukaku. Next question. The player is N'Golo Kante. Next up, the player is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Next question. The player is Luis Suarez. Next one is the player is Lautaro Martinez. Next question. The player is Gianluigi Buffon. Next question. The player is Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Next up, the player is Oscar. Next question. The player is Xherdan Shaqiri. Next question. The player is Adil Rami. And the last question is... the player is Sergio Busquets. How many did you get right? Leave a comment with your answer and subscribe to our channel for more such amazing content. We'll see you in the next one.